Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the world premiere of Alice Darling, directed by Mary Nighy. My name is Cameron Bailey. I'm the CEO here at TIFF. I'm glad to see all of you here. We decided to do a festival this year where every seat could be filled, as opposed to the last 2 years. So we're thrilled to have full houses again, and we're so glad that you're back. Thank you for coming. I want to thank also some of the people and the partners that make everything at TIFF possible. Our lead and major sponsors, Bell, RBC, Bulgari, and Visa for their continued support. And thanks also to our major public supporters, the Government of Canada, the Government of Ontario, Telefilm Canada, and the City of Toronto. And a reminder that this film that you're about to watch is eligible for our most important prize. That's called the People's Choice Award. You vote for it. You may already know how to do that. I'm going to remind you anyhow. You go online to tiff.net/vote. And I also want to thank Elevation Pictures and Lionsgate for providing us with this film. Elevation in the house, Lionsgate in the house. And thanks also to Telefilm Canada for their general support. A shout out to the Consul General of Canada in Los Angeles, a good friend of mine and of TIFF's and of Canadian film, Consul General Zabe Sheikh, who's here. Thank you for coming. And also, I want to recognize and just express our gratitude to Ontario Creates for their generous support of the public and the industry programming at TIFF. And we do have the President and CEO of Ontario Creates here to say a few words. Please join me in welcoming Karen Thornstone.
Thank you, Cameron, and good evening, everyone. It is my absolute pleasure to be here with you tonight and to help introduce Alice Darling. But I think I should start, since Cameron's here on the stage, with a huge congratulations to Cameron and the entire TIFF team on filling our cinemas again this year and on putting together another fabulous festival. I know you will agree with me that the lineup of films and the industry programming is world-class this year, and it is an absolute genuine privilege for Ontario Creates to be TIFF's longtime partner. You know, whether it's in our thriving music sector or our stellar publishers or the all-important screen-based industries, Ontario's creators are making innovative content that is engaging audiences here and around the world. Together, those sectors actually contribute $8 billion and 60,000 jobs to our economy every year. And Ontario Creates is very proud to invest in ensuring that they can continue to grow and compete successfully in that international marketplace. We are thrilled to have played a supporting role in 12 films that are screening at the festival this year. And we're also proud to be celebrating the 17th Annual International Financing Forum with compelling projects from around the globe. More than 100 projects have been financed and launched out of the International Financing Forum, and that includes Alice Darling, which you're going to see tonight. We were especially pleased to be part of tonight's film as longtime supporters of Babe Nation Films and the team at, and of course the team at Elevation Pictures. So on behalf of our team at Ontario Creates, huge congratulations to director Mary Nighy and producers Lindsay Tapscott, Katie Bird-Nolan, Christina Piavison, and Noah Segal. And as you're all going to see in just a few minutes, both in front of the camera and behind the scenes, Alice Darling really represents the excellence of Ontario talent. So enjoy the film.
Thank you, Karen. You know, movies are a great way to dramatize violence. Let's face it, we like watching gunfights and car crashes and explosions and all the kind of stuff that can feel very exciting in a movie theater. They can dramatize that kind of conflict in a very visceral way. But there's something that's harder, more nuanced to do in film, and that's to dramatize unspoken conflict, emotional violence, things that are more interior. And when we saw Alice Darling, we were excited to see a filmmaker, screenwriter, and a cast that could do that in a very sophisticated way and explore something that maybe we don't talk about often enough, which is the violence that is done within a couple. The violence is often done by men towards women, their own intimate partners, but isn't done with fists or weapons or anything like that, but is done with emotion. It's a complex thing to do. You're going to go on a ride tonight that explores this story. This is a story that I think is a powerful and an important one for a lot of us to see. It's done with great care and great sophistication, and I'm so glad that the director of this film, in her debut, and for us it's a remarkable debut, that she's here to present it to you tonight. Please join me in welcoming the director of Alice Darling, Mary Nighy.
Hello, everyone. We're thrilled to be here in Toronto. It's a huge honor to be showing Alice Darling in its premiere at the festival at TIFF, and especially because we shot the whole film in Canada, in Peterborough and in Toronto. So we're delighted to be here. It's also, I think everybody who worked on this film was kind of heroic, because we shot the film in 20 days, in 38-degree heat, wearing masks, and in a pandemic. And somehow we all still remained friends. I'd like to thank you again for having us here, and I'd also like to introduce you to some of the people who made the film with me. First off, I'd like to bring to the stage the writer of the film, Alanna Francis. And then I'd like to bring to the stage the producers, Katie Nolan, Lindsay Tapscott, Noah Segal, and Sam Tipper-Hale. And then I'd like you to meet our editor extraordinaire, Gareth C. Scales. And our brilliant and beautiful costume designer, Marissa Schwartz. And the fabulously talented production designer, Jennifer Morden, who's been pointed out as one of the people to watch. And now I'd like to introduce you to Jess Panetta, who did the hair and makeup. And I'd just also like to say a huge thank you to Mike McLaughlin, who's not here, who's our cinematographer. He's shooting in Newfoundland right now. And also to Owen Pallett, who did the music so beautifully. Next, I'm going to introduce you to the cast. We're going to start with Charlie Carrick, who plays Simon. And we're going to introduce Kaniethiio Horn, who plays Tess. And I'd now like to introduce you to Anna Kendrick. Thank you very much. We're delighted to be here. Enjoy the movie.
Please join me in welcoming back to the stage the director of Alice Darling, Mary Nighy, the star of the film, Anna Kendrick, and Kaniethiio Horn, Charlie Carrick, co-stars of Alice Darling. Thank you so much, all of you, for this remarkable film. I have to imagine it resonates with a lot of people. but I want to ask what the resonance was for you in terms of directing this as your debut feature.
Thank you very much. I think you spoke very well at the beginning, Cameron, about how difficult it can be to dramatize an internal struggle. And when I read Alanna Francis's script, what really struck me was how a lot of what Alice goes through isn't visible, even to her friends at the beginning. And as a director, it's really quite a fun and interesting challenge. How do you make that accessible to an audience with sounds and with the imagery and with the use of flashes and memory? How can you make that available to an audience?
In putting together the cast for this film, that's got to have been a particularly delicate balance you're trying to strike. You need actors who can play the interior elements. You need a good, bad guy's not the right phrase, but a man who is who is clearly the abuser in a relationship, in case you had any doubt who that was, but who is also charming and who doesn't look like an abuser to her friends. And then, of course, you need that group of friends who are supportive, but also, you know, take their time to come around to the reality of the situation. These are a lot of internal elements that these actors have to play. How did you come up with the particular group of actors? And I know you were involved as an executive producer as well, but casting the film, making sure you had the right group of actors to play in this story.
Well, I was extremely excited to bring Anna onto the film. I knew that she would do something absolutely brilliant with Alice, and she has. And then when we were thinking about who would play Simon, you're quite right. He has to be charming. He has to be handsome. Because otherwise, why would Alice be with him? And the movie would be over very quickly. People would watch it and think, well, she should just leave. So we needed somebody who embodied those qualities, and Charlie Carrick was it. And then in terms of the friends, we wanted quite distinct personalities and presences. I think Wunmi Mosaku, who plays Sophie, who's not here tonight because she's filming in London, is brilliant at playing somebody with a strong presence, but who's also quite restrained and knows when to sit back. And then in terms of Tess, we needed somebody who could be, I mean, she's quite tough, Tess, as you see in the film, but she needs to be funny as well. And I found that when I saw Kaniethiio reading the part, she is very droll, and she's got that dry humor which really works for Tess.
Anna, I want to ask you about taking on this role and playing the role as well. And there's some very painful things that your character, that Alice goes through. And it's a terrific performance. I just want to tell you that.
Thank you.
You know, we all know you from so many different films, you know, hilarious comedies and musicals and all kinds of things that are lighter. But you go deep here. And I want to ask you about taking that on and about, you know, all of the years of technique that you have as a comic actor, and then what you do with that when you're playing a role like this.
Yeah, the experience of doing this was really terrifying and exciting, and I think I was at a point where I was working so much and I wasn't really thinking. I was sort of just putting one foot in front of the other, and I'd gotten really good at kind of being the star student. I like being the star student, and I like hearing like, oh, they love the dailies, and it was really scary to think about sort of putting down the armor of playing a character that has sort of charm and wit and is, you know, if not particularly funny, is at least sarcastic or kind of goofy or something. Like I just have something I get to grab onto, and to trust that over the course of filming this, there might be many times that the people behind the monitor or getting the dailies might feel like she's not doing a lot. But knowing that I knew what was happening was true, and building that over the weeks was really scary, and I felt like, you know, I wasn't there for like the fat paycheck, so I tried to keep in mind.
It's a Canadian independent film for the most part. So.
Tried to keep in mind, like, you know, what the challenge that drew me to it in the first place.
Beautiful work, really. I think a new dimension that I think a lot of us would not have seen you do before.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
I hate you so much. She really does bully me all the time.
Whatever. She's obsessed with me.
It's so true.
Kaniethiio and Charlie, I want to ask you about atmosphere on set. This is very sensitive subject matter. I imagine you need a real atmosphere of trust to do what you all did in the film. And I wonder, as actors, how do you find that, and how do you maintain it when you're shooting a film over a very short schedule as well?
We did a lot of work before we went to camera. A lot of, camera. Me and Anna met on Zoom and had a long conversation. I know everything about her life now. And then once we got to the little place that we were staying, we would get together, me, Wunmi, Mary, and Anna, and go over all of the scenes that we had together. And we just discussed a lot of things, and we analyzed it together. And the thespian in me, it was totally fulfilled. I loved that. So that when we got to camera, we weren't doing all of that work there. And when it would be cut, we were able to laugh and to, enjoy being outside on a lake.
I had done, Anna and I had spoken on Zoom with Mary a lot, and then we had done some rehearsals of some of the most important, intimate scenes, and tried to find a way to tell the story in these very, so much between them is unspoken that things are built up and unravel with just a few looks or words that could mean one thing or could mean another. So there was a lot of that preparation, and then when I first came to work, it was for that dinner scene at the Cottage. So the atmosphere was a lot like it was here when he showed up for that dinner scene,
He thought I hated him, IRL.
Yeah, it really felt like a very unwelcome guest, and that's how it should have felt, yeah.
Nicely done, Mary.
Thank you. I think that was some brilliant scheduling from our first AD, actually.
For us here in Toronto and Canadians watching it, it's just lovely to see the environment that you shot in, both the urban environment here, but also what we call Cottage Country. And many, many Torontonians escape to Cottage Country, as you know, every summer and even beyond that. But it becomes almost like a character. The urban and the rural country environments become characters in a way, both of them, at least in my viewing, kind of closing in on Alice a little bit. Even the beautiful outdoors seems like it's only a temporary haven for her. I'm interested in how you decided to frame the environments you were shooting in.
Great question. I think when we were thinking about the city, I wanted to shoot in downtown Toronto. I love those enormous buildings. The scale of it is really exciting to me as a European. And I also thought that it helps Alice feel quite hemmed in when you see her between these big buildings. And it feels quite sterile and different to when she goes to the countryside. We also made a choice stylistically that the camera would be stable or on sticks when she's in the city. So there's not much fluidity. You've got a bit of steady cam, but there's no handheld. And then when she gets in the car and she's leaving the city and leaving Simon behind, the style changes and it becomes handheld. And we also thought, and then that continues into the Cottage Country. But we also thought a little bit about palette. We knew that the Cottage Country was going to be quite vivid greens and blues. And then we wanted the city to feel, even in terms of what they're wearing, and the backgrounds, to be quite neutral and dark and grey. So a lot of thought went into what does that express about Alice's psychology when she's in the city versus when she's a bit freer in the country. But I think you're absolutely right that there is something quite suffocating about Cottage Country also, with the dying bugs and the murky lake water as well.
Very true. I want to invite your questions as well. So if you've got something, please just hold that or form your question. Actually, to someone who's already done that, why don't you go ahead? You've got a question. Question is, how did you prepare for the role, Anna?
Well, the story, look, I think we all showed up because the script really touched something, and it was very personal to me, and you know, I mean, Kaniethiio is sort of referring to this first Zoom that we had where I sort of trauma dumped all over her, and I think that was sort of this thing that was going around the whole set, and
I was like, same.
and I think, you know, the first day that I had on set after getting out of very strict quarantine was like 17 conversations with people going, I showed up because I see myself in this, and there were days that would sort of devolve into group therapy, which was the only time I ever saw Mary look sort of stressed. She was like, right, this is great, guys, but we are making a film. You know, I didn't have to do a ton of prep. And I think there's probably a lot of people sitting here watching this who wouldn't have to. And I think that I was really blessed to have a team around me that made me feel very held. Like watching that scene where Kaniethiio brings me the sandwich, I was like, oh, that's how I felt the whole movie. Because everybody showed up with that kind of vulnerability. You know, there's a big team of people out here earlier, and I've heard all their stories, and they really held me through giving this performance and made me feel very safe to do that.
Thank you.
Oh God, don't clap, please don't clap. Don't clap an actor talking about process, oh my God.
We love to hear you talk about process.
They
What are you
like your
talking about?
vulnerability.
Yes, here? Questions about the lip balm scene?
Yes. Well spotted. I think there are two resonances, as you say. The lip balm, we're subverting maybe an audience's expectation that when she walks into the abandoned house, she might find a dead body, which might happen in a different kind of film, but not in Alice Darling. And then in terms of the lip balm, I think when Simon turns up at the cottage and casually mentions that the missing girl is dead in quite an offhand way, it's very affecting for Alice because she has identified to some extent with that girl. And through hearing about the extremity of what's happened to this young girl, she can start to see her own situation a little and get a bit of perspective on it. So I think she holds on to the lip balm as a kind of token, and then when Simon ridicules it, I think it's quite devastating for her.
I also think there was something kind of amazing happened in that scene where Wunmi is not here and Kaniethiio were looking at me when I'm holding the lip balm and you're so dismissive. And when I looked across the table at them, it was like, it became clearer to me what the lip balm meant, because it felt like I was holding on to the idea that it would somehow give me clarity. Like, if something was simple and I solved this mystery, things would be simpler. And like looking across the table at them was so difficult because it was like I could feel them going, I know you wanted this to be something, and like you'll have to figure it out yourself.
It's not that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, any questions on this side? Or if you're up top, we cannot really see you, so if you got a question, you might just have to call out. Thank you. Questions about the sex scene and what that meant in terms of the story and the bigger picture of that.
Kaniethiio, would you like to?
Mary, shoot it over to Mary.
So I think you're referring to the scene between Alice and Simon in the cottage bedroom. Is that right? Yeah. Okay. I think that can be read multiple ways. My view of it is that it's possibly an attempt to take back some kind of control, and it doesn't work. I think it's also that Alice has a lot of pent-up feelings and frustrations, and in the moment, that feels like a way to release them. But I think when I've shown this film to the very small audiences of friends that have seen it before, lots of people have read that scene very differently, and I'm very open to those readings as well.
Thank you for your question. Any other, yes, go ahead. Did you say the text tones? Question about the text tones, yeah.
Another great question. In fact, when I met Gareth C. Scales, who's the editor of Alice Darling, he was talking to me about the script, and he said, I really think that the phone and the repetitive nature of the texts can become quite haunting and uncomfortable. And I also think that when the texts stop, it'll be a relief for an audience. I think he said to me, and I think he's quite right, that we've all experienced dread in relationship to our phone when we're getting a work, whether it's to do with work or a friend who's gone off the rails or something in our personal lives. And I think we wanted that feeling that the phone itself is a sort of extension of Simon and that he's getting at her with those repetitive sounds.
I want to just follow up on something that you were talking about earlier, which is, when you were beginning to make the film and you were talking about it and you were having those sessions and everyone feels that they recognize something about themselves and their own relationships in the story. I'm curious what the men found they recognized about themselves in the story. And Charlie, I don't know if I can start with you, since you're the only
one
here.
Yeah, here I am, the spokesperson for coercive controllers the world over. The job I always wanted. You know what? It's easy to do these kind of roles and just be like, well, I'm not like him, so I'll just act like I think people who are like this act. It's much more uncomfortable when you actually have to look at your own behavior and think about the kind of behaviors that could lead to an escalated version of it, like this. And I think you can see from the movie that, from the absolute hell that Alice is in, that's not being done to her by somebody who's in a happy place himself, right? It's someone who's flailing and who is dragging someone else down with him. And the whole movie for me is like she's almost under the water, she's almost drowned, but she somehow finds some way to survive that, which makes it like a really hopeful thing. But it's hard to get people to talk about that kind of behavior because it usually comes from a place of shame, right? Shame about the behavior that these people are perpetrating, shame about the source of the shame. So you have to just make some educated guesses on it.
Thank you. I'm fascinated to imagine what this film will do as people begin to watch it and start those conversations about what they do actually recognize, what we all recognize about our own relationships in it. It's really productively unsettling, I think. So thank you. We're almost out of time. Is there one more question that we can take before we've got to run it? Yes, right here. Comment is, this is one of those great more of a comments than a question, thank you. This is that you thought that Mary did an incredible job and you applaud her. So thank you, I think we can all agree with that. Please join me in thanking once again the director, Mary Nighy, Anna Kendrick, Kaniethiio Horn, and Charlie Carrick. Thank you for coming tonight.